Welcome back. Today we're diving into something a little different, a bit of internet lore that's gotten a surprising amount of attention. You sent us an anonymously written short story called Woody Gets Wood, along with a pretty in-depth analysis of it, and even a dramatic reading someone posted on YouTube. I have to admit, I was a little surprised by the subject matter, to say the least. But it's clearly struck a chord with a lot of people. So the question is, what makes this seemingly simple story so fascinating and controversial?
What's interesting is that Woody Gets Wood taps into something that a lot of fan fiction explores, taking familiar characters and putting them in completely unexpected situations. This story takes that idea to the extreme, but it's also surprisingly well written. It starts by placing us right back in Andy's room, which anyone who's seen Toy Story will instantly recognize.
It's true. The story doesn't waste any time setting the scene. And then we get to the central event that sets everything in motion. Andy's engaging in a little self-gratification when Woody, his trusty cowboy doll, becomes similarly, shall we say, affected. Now, for those unfamiliar with this particular corner of the internet, Woody Gets Wood is a fan-written story that imagines a rather adult scenario involving Andy and his toys.
And it's the way the story handles this scenario that's really captivating. Woody doesn't just stay silent. He reveals that he's sentient and confesses his desire to be inside Andy. And here's the kicker.
Yeah.
Andy apparently knew the toys were alive all along and seems to reciprocate Woody's feelings.
Which takes the whole toys coming to life concept from the movies to a whole new and slightly disturbing level. Things escalate pretty quickly from there. And well, let's just say it doesn't end well for anyone involved.
The story shifts into a script format as things get more intense. And that's one of the things that makes it so interesting to analyze. There's a line that sparked a lot of debate among readers. Being drenched in his urine made him harder than ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's deliberately ambiguous about who him refers to Andy or Woody.
Yeah, the A-Eurolonists versus W-Eurolonists debate, right? That's become a whole thing online.
It really highlights the power of ambiguity in storytelling. By leaving that pronoun unclear, the author forces the reader to become an active participant in interpreting the story. It's like a Rorschach test for your own assumptions and interpretations.
You know, it's funny because it also speaks to how much we, as fans, try to find meaning in every detail of the stories we love. It's like we can't handle the uncertainty, so we come up with our own explanations.
Exactly. We try to fill in the gaps, to make sense of the seemingly nonsensical. And that process of interpretation is a huge part of what makes ham culture so vibrant and engaging.
Absolutely. Speaking of interpretation, another detail that caught my attention was the use of Japanese honorifics like senpai and chan by the characters. It felt a little out of place considering the Toy Story universe, and I wondered if it was just a random stylistic choice or if there was something more to it.
That's a sharp observation. It definitely adds a layer of complexity to the character dynamics. Senpai, used by Woody, usually indicates respect and admiration for someone with more experience or a higher status. It suggests that, despite being Andy's toy, he views him with a certain reverence.
That's an interesting point. It implies a power dynamic that goes beyond the typical owner-toy relationship. And then Andy uses Chan when addressing Woody, which is more casual, often used for children or close female friends. That seems to add another layer of intimacy to their connection.
Right. So by using these honorifics, the author subtly hints at a more nuanced and complex relationship between Andy and Woody, one that goes beyond the surface level of owner and toy.
It's like they're using these terms to signal a shared history, a bond that's unspoken but deeply felt.
Precisely. It adds a layer of depth and meaning to their interactions, even amidst the, shall we say, unconventional nature of the scenario.
Okay, so we've got this ambiguous pronoun, the Japanese honorifics, and then there's a detail about the cherry-flavored lube. I mean, why cherry? Is there a deeper meaning behind that choice? Or is the author just messing with us at this point?
Remember, the story establishes that Andy knows the toys are alive. He's known all along. So the choice of cherry-flavored lube could be a deliberate act on Andy's part. It could be a way of acknowledging Woody's preferences, his desires.
That's a fascinating thought. It implies a level of intimacy and understanding that goes way beyond what we see in the Toy Story films. Almost like Andy is trying to cater to Woody's specific needs.
Exactly. It suggests a level of consideration and care that complicates the power dynamics at play. It makes you question whether this is simply a one-sided desire on Woody's part, or there's a deeper emotional connection between them.
And then there's the fact that the other toys aren't just bystanders in all of this. They watch, and eventually they participate in what's happening. I was curious about their role in the story and what you think the author might be trying to say with that detail.
Their voyeurism and eventual participation add a layer of complexity to the story's exploration of desire and transgression. It's like their own repressed desires are ignited by witnessing Andy and Woody's interaction.
So it's not just about Andy and Woody then. It's about the other toys and their own unspoken longings.
Exactly. It suggests a broader commentary on the nature of desire, how it can be both individual and collective, and how it can be influenced by the actions and desires of those around us.
That's a really interesting interpretation. It raises questions about the dynamics within this toy community and how they might be affected by witnessing such a taboo act.
It also raises the stakes of the story. The consequences of Andy and Woody's actions are no longer confined to just the two of them. It ripples outwards, affecting the entire group of toys.
And that ultimately leads us to the story's climax, which is, to put it mildly, shocking and disturbing.
The way the story describes Andy's demise is graphic and unsettling. It's a stark reminder that even in this fantastical world of sentient toys, there are real-world consequences to actions, especially when those actions push boundaries and violate unspoken rules.
It's interesting how the story doesn't shy away from those consequences. The author could have easily gone for a more lighthearted or comedic approach, but instead they choose to show the very real and tragic outcome of what happens.
That's one of the things that elevates Woody Gets Wood, beyond just a piece of shock fiction. It forces the reader to confront the darker aspects of desire and the potential for things to go horribly wrong when those desires are unchecked.
And it does so within a framework that most people are familiar with. We all know Woody and Andy from Toy Story. We have this pre-existing affection for these characters, which makes the story's events all the more disturbing.
It's a brilliant use of subversion. The author takes these beloved, iconic characters and places them in a situation that completely upends our expectations. It's like seeing the dark underbelly of a childhood fantasy.
It makes you question everything you thought you knew about these characters and their world. And speaking of the world, another detail that stuck with me was how the story's format changes as it progresses. It starts with traditional prose, but then it shifts into a script format, almost like we're watching a play. Do you think there's a reason behind that choice?
I think that shift in format is crucial to the story's impact. By transitioning to a script format, the author creates a sense of immediacy and intimacy. It's like we're right there in the room with Andy and Woody, hearing their words, witnessing their actions firsthand.
It definitely heightens the tension and makes the story feel more visceral. We're no longer just observing from a distance, we're thrust into the heart of the action.
Exactly. And I think it also serves to highlight the characters' agency by giving them distinct voices. The author emphasizes that they're not just objects being acted upon, they're active participants in this unfolding drama.
That makes sense. It adds another layer of complexity to their relationship and makes their choices feel more consequential. It's like the author is saying, these are not just toys anymore, they're characters with their own desires and motivations.
Precisely. And that ties back to one of the central themes of Woody Gets Wood, the blurring of lines between fantasy and reality. The story takes place in a world where toys are secretly alive, a world that's both familiar and fantastical. And that blend of the real and the imagined is further emphasized by the shift in narrative style.
It's like the author is playing with our expectations, constantly challenging us to question what's real and what's not. And in a way, that's what good storytelling is all about, isn't it? Taking us out of our comfort zones and making us see the world in a new light.
Absolutely. And Woody Gets Wood does that in a way that's both unsettling and strangely compelling.
You know, even though the story is, well, pretty explicit in its content, it never feels gratuitous or exploitative. It's like the author is using the shock value to explore something deeper, something about the nature of desire and the consequences of our actions.
I agree. The story doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of human nature, but it also presents those aspects with a certain level of nuance and complexity.
And ultimately, that's what makes Woody Gets Wood such a fascinating and thought-provoking piece of internet lore. It's a story that gets under your skin, stays with you long after you've finished reading it, and forces you to confront some uncomfortable truths about yourself and the world around you.
It's a story that sparks conversation, challenges our assumptions, and ultimately, I think, helps us to better understand the power and the potential dangers of our own imaginations.
I'm curious, what are some of the most common interpretations or reactions you've come across when it comes to Woody Gets Wood?
Well, as we've discussed, there's a lot of debate around the story's more ambiguous elements, like the hymn debate and the significance of the Japanese honorifics. But beyond those specific details, I think people's reactions tend to fall into a few broad categories. Some people see it as purely erotic, a kind of guilty pleasure read. Others find it deeply disturbing, even offensive. And then there are those who, like us, see it as a more complex piece of work, something that's both titillating and thought-provoking.
I guess it's a testament to the story's power that it can elicit such a wide range of responses.
Absolutely. It's a story that resists easy categorization. And I think that's part of what makes it so compelling.
One thing that's been on my mind throughout this deep dive is the question of authorial intent. Do you think the author set out to create something intentionally shocking or subversive? Or do you think the story's meaning has taken on a life of its own, evolving through the interpretations and discussions of its readers?
That's a fascinating question, and unfortunately one that we can't definitively answer without knowing the author's intentions. But I think it's safe to say that Woody Gets Wood has become a cultural phenomenon that transcends the author's original vision.
It's like the story has escaped the confines of the page and entered the realm of collective imagination. It's become a shared experience, a cultural touchstone that people use to explore their own ideas and anxieties about sexuality, desire, and the boundaries between fantasy and reality.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes it so valuable, both as a piece of storytelling and as a cultural artifact.
It's a reminder that even the most seemingly frivolous or shocking stories can have deeper layers of meaning, and that those meanings are often shaped by the communities and conversations that surround them.
And it's a testament to the enduring power of fan fiction, how it can take familiar characters and worlds and use them to explore complex themes and ideas in ways that traditional storytelling often shies away from.
It's like fan fiction gives us permission to play with the stories we love, to deconstruct them, reimagine them, and ultimately to make them our own.
And in doing so, we often discover new layers of meaning and complexity that we might never have seen before.
And speaking of new layers of meaning, one aspect of Woody Gets Wood that we haven't really touched on yet is the commentary on consumerism, these toys, who are essentially products designed for children's entertainment, become the central figures in a story about adult desire and transgression. I wonder if the author is trying to say something about the way we commodify and fetishize childhood innocence.
That's a really insightful observation. There's definitely a layer of commentary there about the way we project our own desires and anxieties onto these inanimate objects. And by placing these toys in such a hypersexualized context, the story forces us to confront the potential darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly innocent childhood icons.
It's like the story is holding up a mirror to our own cultural obsessions, forcing us to question the ways in which we sexualize and commodify childhood.
And it's doing so in a way that's both provocative and unsettling.
Which brings us back to the idea of Woody Gets Wood as a cultural Rorschach test. What we see in the story, how we interpret its events and characters, says as much about us as it does about the story itself.
It reveals our own biases, our own anxieties, our own understanding of desire and transgression.
It's a story that challenges us to confront the uncomfortable, the taboo, the things that we often try to keep hidden from view.
And in doing so, it opens up a space for dialogue and reflection, a space where we can grapple with these complex issues in a safe and controlled environment.
It's like the story gives us permission to explore the forbidden without actually crossing any real-world boundaries.
Exactly. It's a form of safe exploration, a way of engaging with our darker impulses without actually acting on them.
And that brings us back to the question we posed at the beginning of our deep dive. What makes Woody Gets Wood so enduring and thought-provoking? Why does it continue to spark such strong reactions even years after it first appeared online?
I think it's a combination of factors. The story's shocking premise, its deliberate ambiguity, its unexpected use of language and cultural references, and its ultimately tragic ending all contribute to its staying power.
It's like a perfect storm of storytelling elements coming together to create something that's both repulsive and strangely captivating.
And we can't forget the power of the internet to amplify and spread these kinds of stories. Woody Gets Wood might have remained a niche curiosity if it had stayed within a small circle of readers, but because it was posted online, it was able to reach a much wider audience and spark a global conversation.
It's a reminder that the internet has fundamentally changed the way we consume and interact with stories. It's no longer a one-way street from author to reader. It's a dynamic, multifaceted conversation where everyone can participate and contribute their own interpretations.
And I think Woody Gets Wood is a prime example of how that dynamic can play out in fascinating and unexpected ways.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this controversial piece of internet lore, we want to leave you with a few final thoughts to ponder.
What did you find most surprising or intriguing about Woody Gets Wood? Did it challenge your perceptions of these beloved characters? Did it make you think differently about the nature of desire, the power of storytelling, or the role of fan culture in shaping our understanding of the world?
Is Woody Gets Wood ultimately a tragedy? A love story, a social commentary, or perhaps a strange and unsettling blend of all three. And if this piece of fan fiction can elicit such strong reactions, what does that say about the power of storytelling to tap into our deepest fears, desires, and anxieties?
We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your reactions and interpretations with us on social media or on our website. This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through the world of Woody Gets Wood.